The room went silent before I even realized why. Conversations froze mid-laughter. The pianist's melody stumbled on a sour note, and every eye in the ballroom seemed to tilt in my direction. I had only said, "Congratulations on the big news coming your way." A simple, harmless line. Or so I thought. Across the marble floor, Camilla Sterling's smile flickered like a chandelier light about to burn out. Her perfectly glossed lips curved into something sharper, colder. For a moment. She didn't move, just stared at me with the kind of calculation you'd expect from a Wall Street shark, not the CFO's darling niece. I stood there, champagne glass trembling in my hand, wondering what invisible tripwire I'd just triggered. For 11 years. This company had been my second home. I was the architect behind its $2 billion audit control system, the invisible backbone no one praised when profits soared. But everyone leaned on when disaster loomed. I had spent nights debugging code until my eyes burned, weekends chasing discrepancies no one else could spot. My loyalty wasn't loud, it was proven, measured in years of silent victories. Camilla? She measured success in designer heels and Instagram likes. She didn't build, she inherited, dropped into an executive chair cushioned by nepotism. She was the kind of leader who cared more about photo ops than financial ethics. And tonight, this opulent ballroom, draped in velvet, glowing with golden chandeliers, was her stage. The quarterly celebration had morphed into her unofficial coronation. Except now. The air was brittle. Camilla tilted her head, eyes narrowing as if I'd just spoken in code. Interesting choice of words. Avery, she said softly, but the chill in her tone drew blood. My stomach knotted. This was absurd. It was a toast. Nothing more. But when her phone lit up in her manicured hand, I caught a flash of text over her shoulder. Add her to the list. Handle it tonight. See? My pulse spiked. I didn't know what list she meant, but instinct screamed one thing, whatever game I'd stumbled into. The rules had changed, and for the first time in 11 years. I felt it, the ground shifting beneath my feet. The ballroom lights were still burning in my eyes when they pulled me aside. No explanations, no polite excuses, just a tight grip on my elbow and a murmured, "Ms. Locke, this way." My heels clicked against the marble floor, echoing like countdowns in an empty cathedral. They led me into a glass-walled conference room that felt colder than any board meeting I'd ever attended. Inside, Camilla sat at the head of the table, framed by city lights like a queen on her throne. 2 junior managers flanked her, kids who'd been at this company for barely a year. Their faces lit with a mix of curiosity and fear. "Close the door," Camilla said, without looking at me. I stood frozen for a beat, my throat dry. "What's going on?" She turned, her eyes sharp as broken glass. "What's going on?" she repeated slowly. "Is that you just violated company protocol. Here. No one hires you to predict the future. Your little remark tonight? It wasn't clever. It was a breach." "A breach?" My voice cracked in disbelief. "It was a congratulation. Camilla, that's all." Her manicured hand sliced the air, cutting me off. "You're not important enough to have opinions outside your spreadsheets." Each word landed like a slap. The 2 managers exchanged uneasy glances, but no one spoke. The silence pressed down, heavier than the glass walls. For 11 years, I'd bled for this company. I'd built the very system that made their audits bulletproof, carried them through scandals that could have sunk careers. And now, I was being carved up by a woman who thought balance sheets were accessories to her designer heels. I opened my mouth to protest, but then came the click, the sound of a pen against paper. Casual as signing a dinner check, Camilla scrawled her name across a termination order, the ink curling like a death sentence. "Effective immediately," she said, and nodded toward the managers. "Broadcast this to the internal channel. Let the team know what happens when people forget their place. My breath caught. Broadcast? This wasn't discipline, it was execution theater. A soft chime interrupted my spiral. I glanced down at my phone. Subject: termination notice. Effective now. My name, my role. 11 years reduced to a digital afterthought. I felt the sting behind my eyes. Hot and raw. But I didn't give her the satisfaction. I lifted my chin, let the weight of the silence speak for me, and nodded once. If Camilla wanted obedience, she'd get silence. For now. The glass doors whispered shut behind me, sealing off 11 years of my life like a vault I would never open again. The marble lobby, once a place where I'd floated on small triumphs and caffeine highs, now felt like a corridor of judgment. Eyes followed me, some wide with pity, others narrowed in that careful corporate way, as if my downfall were contagious. No one spoke, not even the receptionist, who once offered me coffee with a smile, dared to meet my gaze. In their silence, I heard everything. You're done. You don't matter anymore. My heels clicked across the polished floor, a hollow metronome counting down the seconds of humiliation. The elevator ride to the ground floor stretched like a punishment, each mirrored wall reflecting a woman I barely recognized. Jaw tight, breath shallow, spine rigid in a losing battle against collapse. Outside, the city's night air slapped me like a truth I didn't want to face. I stood there, coat clutched to my chest, watching the tower that had been my world loom above me. 11 years. Gone in 11 minutes. I had given everything. Sleepless nights debugging systems no one else understood. Weekends lost to crisis calls when everyone else ran for cover. I had built the architecture of trust, the $2 billion audit control system that kept this empire from crumbling. And yet, all it took was one sentence, one slip of courtesy, to reduce me to an expendable footnote. My phone buzzed. At first, I thought it was another cruel notification, a severance email, maybe HR's final insult. But when I glanced down, my breath caught. Alert. Tier 3 surveillance mode activated. Secure report dispatch in progress. For a moment, the weight on my chest lifted. That wasn't corporate jargon. That was my code. My system, the one they thought they owned, had just switched to self-defense mode, triggered by the termination flag. Exactly as designed. Reports were already moving through encrypted channels, bypassing every firewall they believed could stop the truth. Financial discrepancies, log trails of every manual adjustment Camilla made in her desperate bid to hide losses. Every secret they buried was now digging its own way out. A laugh bubbled up, sharp and brittle, but I swallowed it. Not here, not yet. Instead, I pressed the phone to my palm, feeling its vibration like a pulse, steady and certain. I started walking, the city lights blurring into streaks of gold against the ink-black sky. Cameras from the lobby security followed my exit, capturing what they thought was a woman broken, if only they knew. The storm wasn't behind those glass doors. It was walking out with me. The city was a blur outside my cab window, but my mind was a vault of precision. My fingers hovered over the phone screen, scrolling through a private dashboard few knew existed. Not IT, not the CFO, not even the board that signed my paychecks for over a decade. They believed they owned my work. They believed wrong. Years ago, when I built the audit control system that became the company's crown jewel, I made sure it wasn't just a fortress for them. It was a shield for me. Buried deep inside its architecture was a silent failsafe. If my credentials were revoked without due process, the system would trigger Tier 3 surveillance mode. It wasn't sabotage, it was insurance. Because in this business, loyalty was praised in public and punished in private. That line of code they all overlooked? It was my lifeline. So when Camilla pressed her manicured finger against that confirm termination button, she didn't just end my career. She lit the fuse. The second her approval hit the server, my system flipped its hidden switch. Encrypted backups split like tributaries, rerouting financial records through secure tunnels I'd built years ago. Destination? The Federal Audit Oversight Commission. Every number, every transaction, every midnight edit no one was supposed to see. And that wasn't all. The automated report didn't just include quarterly summaries. It carried full integrity logs, chronological fingerprints of every adjustment made by every user, including Camilla. As I watched the progress bar on my private feed, 83%, 91%, 100%, a calm I hadn't felt all night settled over me. Inside that glass room, she believed humiliation was my full stop. What she didn't know was that she'd just written her own first line in an investigation file. I imagined her now, probably toasting herself in that ballroom, blissfully unaware that her quick-fix edits, those late-night alterations to hide a $320 million shortfall, were already in federal hands. Her name wasn't buried in code anymore. It was rising to the surface like oil in water. The cab slowed at a red light, and for the first time in hours, I exhaled. This wasn't revenge. Not yet. This was a process I'd engineered with the same care I'd given every safeguard in their empire. They thought I was predictable, silent, contained. They were half right. I slipped the phone into my bag, a small smile tugging at the corner of my lips. The waves were building behind me, and I was no longer standing on their shore. Camilla hated waiting, and she hated surprises even more. Yet both were breathing down her neck as she sat in the glass-walled war room, staring at the crimson error message flashing across the screen. Report invalid. Verification failed. Her polished nails tapped against the table like a ticking clock. This wasn't supposed to happen. Tonight was meant to be a victory lap, one last dry run before the big investor meeting tomorrow. All the pieces were in place. Polished slides, tailored talking points, a narrative that painted Sterling Financial as untouchable. And now? Now the system she'd bragged about for months was spitting out rejection codes like a stubborn mule. "What the hell is this?" she snapped, swiveling toward the IT lead, a nervous man whose tie looked tighter by the second. It seems the final integrity check didn't pass," he stammered, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "The system says the report isn't authentic." Camilla's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Not authentic? It's the same data I—" She stopped herself, jaw locking hard enough to ache. "Fix it, now." The IT lead nodded, sweat purling at his temple. "Running diagnostics, but it's odd. The system's requesting a level 3 verification protocol." "Then give it whatever the hell it wants," Camilla barked, but her pulse was pounding in her ears. Another pause. Then the man looked up, voice small. "It needs a digital signature. Avery Locks." The name slammed into the room like a bullet. Camilla's perfectly powdered face didn't flinch, but inside, heat crawled up her spine. That woman again. Even out the door. Avery was still in her way. Camilla forced a brittle smile. "Avery's gone, so find a workaround. There's always a workaround." The IT lead hesitated, glancing at the error log. "Ma'am, this isn't standard encryption. This is proprietary. It might take time." "Then buy time," Camilla snapped, leaning forward, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "And if you can't, find someone who can. I don't care what it costs." She sat back, crossing one elegant leg over the other, projecting calm like armor. Inside, her thoughts were clawing. This couldn't unravel, not after all the late nights, the buried edits, the perfect illusion she'd crafted to hide that $320 million crater in the balance sheet. For a flicker of a second, panic gnawed at the edges of her confidence. But then she smoothed her skirt, exhaled slowly, and summoned that familiar mantra. Everything can be bought. Everything can be controlled. She believed it. She had to. Camilla's penthouse office looked like a movie set, floor-to-ceiling windows spilling moonlight across imported marble. City lights glittering like an audience applauding her ambition. Except tonight. Her stage felt like a trap. The investor briefing was less than 14 hours away, and the system still refused to validate the reports. Every second ticked like a warning siren in her head. Her manicured hand gripped the edge of her desk as she whispered into the phone. "Just get it done. No excuses." The man on the other end chuckled softly. "You're asking me to crack a proprietary audit system built by the best in the business. This isn't some college firewall, but—" He let the word hang like bait. "I love a challenge." His name was Rafe Mercer, an underground legend, the kind of hacker whispered about in boardrooms as both savior and shadow. Camilla wired the advance payment before he even asked. Minutes later, the secure call buzzed again. Rafe's camera feed popped up, revealing a dimly lit room, screens glowing behind him like constellations. "All right, sweetheart," he drawled, fingers dancing over his keyboard. "Your golden cage is impressive, but not unbreakable." Camilla exhaled for the first time in hours, watching streams of code flicker across his screen like rain. Lines fell, barriers collapsed, security protocols folded like paper. Her pulse slowed. Her confidence, once fractured, began stitching itself back together. "See?" Rafe smirked. "Almost there. Whoever built this left a hell of a—" "Wait." His voice hitched, just slightly, but enough to make Camilla's breath snag. "What?" she snapped. Rafe leaned closer to the monitor, brows furrowing. "Double lock. Not just a digital signature. There's a second gate. Biometric authentication tied to a verified national ID. And guess who it belongs to?" Camilla's grip tightened around her glass. "Avery!" "Bingo!" Rafe's grin faded into a grimace. Without her unique token and live biometric ping, this system doesn't just stay locked, it bricks any attempt to override. Permanently. For a heartbeat. The room was silent, except for the hum of the city below. Camilla's reflection in the glass looked nothing like the poised executive she projected. Her jaw was clenched, her pupils wide with something dangerously close to panic. Then, in one violent arc, she hurled her laptop to the floor. The crash reverberated through the penthouse, shards skittering across marble like ice. Down the hall, her assistant startled. "Ma'am?" Camilla smoothed her hair with trembling fingers, voice silk over steel. "Bring me a fresh machine," she said calmly. "And tell the CFO I'll have everything ready by morning." Her mask slid back into place, flawless and cold. Inside, though, the rope she'd been balancing on was fraying fast. She whispered to herself, as if saying it made it true. "Everything can still be controlled." The alert hit my phone at 2:15 a.m. A single vibration against the nightstand that dragged me from a restless half-sleep. I blinked against the glow, pulse skipping as the notification expanded across the screen. "Unauthorized modification detected. Video capture active. Logs secured." For a second, I thought fatigue was playing tricks on me. But then the dashboard opened, crisp and undeniable. Every line of code whispering the truth in cold precision. Camilla was in the system, not just in it, burrowing through its core, scraping numbers like a thief rifling through vaults. I slid upright, the sheets pooling at my waist, and tapped into the live feed. There she was, bathed in the sterile glow of her office lights, face set in a mask of icy determination as her fingers tore across the keyboard. The camera angle caught every detail, the trembling in her wrist, the way her jaw tightened with each manual override. The log scrolled beside the video, a brutal black and white confession rendered in cold precision. At 2:14 in the morning, adjustment initiated. Operating loss for Q3. Barely 2 minutes later, override approved under user credentials for C. Sterling. 4 minutes after that, a data mask applied, reshaping the balance sheet summary like nothing had ever been wrong. Finally, at 23 past 2, a hidden ledger was flagged, proof of something far darker than a simple mistake. My stomach turned as the figure resolved on screen. Negative $320 million. Losses buried under glossy charts and curated optimism. The empire they paraded as unshakable was a paper fortress. And Camilla, queen of this crumbling chessboard, was betting everything on deception. For a long moment, I just stared, frozen in the dim glow of my apartment, the city humming obliviously outside my window. 11 years I spent building a system to uphold truth. 11 years believing integrity still mattered. And now, the woman who humiliated me in front of an entire floor was carving through that truth like it was hers to command. A soft chime sliced through my thoughts. Another notification slid into view. This one colder than steel. Federal Audit Oversight Commission, evidence received, emergency inquiry initiated. I read it twice, the words sinking like stones. My failsafe had done its job, not just capturing logs, but transmitting them in real time. Camilla's edits weren't secrets anymore. They were exhibits in a case already unfolding beyond her reach. I leaned back, exhaling slow, controlled. This wasn't triumph, not yet. It was something sharper, something that left frost in my veins. Because the scope of what I'd uncovered wasn't just fraud. It was wrought at the highest tier of a corporation that once felt like home. I closed the laptop, letting the weight of that reality settle. Somewhere uptown, Camilla was probably clinking glasses, convinced her empire still stood on marble. She had no idea the floor beneath her had already cracked. The investor meeting was supposed to be flawless, a performance polished down to every comma. Instead, the screen at the far end of the mahogany table glared back in hostile red. Report validation failed. Export denied. A low murmur rippled through the room. 30 of the firm's most powerful stakeholders sat frozen for half a breath. Then the questions began, sharp and overlapping like hailstones. What does that mean? Is this a system glitch? Are you saying these numbers aren't certified? Camilla felt her throat tighten. She rose from her chair. Every muscle in her body trained to exude control, even as her pulse battered against her ribs. A temporary delay, she said, voice smooth, almost bored. It is handling it as we speak. But then came the whisper, sliding across the glossy table like a blade. Then why are shares dropping in real time? Camilla's head snapped toward the wall-mounted ticker. The numbers were hemorrhaging green, draining into red as Sterling Financial's stock slid live. 1 point, then 3, then 6, plunging like a body into deep water. Gasps sliced through the air. Someone cursed under their breath. Across the table, the CFO, her uncle, shifted forward, his voice a growl wrapped in disbelief. Camilla, what is happening? She opened her mouth, but no sound came. The world had narrowed to the erratic beat of her heart and the brutal dance of red numbers on the screen. She fumbled for words, for any script that could salvage this catastrophe, but before she could shape a sentence, the main display flickered, once, twice, and then went black. A hush fell, thick and suffocating. Then, in a font that looked almost mocking, new text bloomed across the 60-inch screen. Integrity alert. Data violations detected. Evidence submitted to Federal Audit Oversight Commission. It landed like a gunshot. The room convulsed in whispers that rose to full-throated panic. Phones appeared in fists, screens lighting with headlines as news leaked faster than any PR team could spin. Sterling Financial under federal scrutiny. Camilla stood rooted, her manicured nails biting crescents into her palms. Her vision tunneled on that one sentence pulsing across the screen like a death knell. Evidence submitted, which meant logs, which meant her edits, every override, every midnight mask, were now more than secrets. They were proof. A word. Camilla! The CFO's voice was steel behind clenched teeth, but the fury in his eyes spoke louder than the hush that had reclaimed the room. She swallowed hard, spine stiffening under the weight of 30 pairs of eyes, some wide with shock, others gleaming with the quiet cruelty of vindication. For the first time since Avery's dismissal, Camilla felt it, the ground not just shifting, but splitting wide open beneath her heels. The call came as I stood on the rooftop of my apartment building. The city's skyline stretched before me like a theater stage just before the final act. My phone buzzed once. No name, just a number I recognized from the boardroom's inner circle. "Avery," the voice said, clipped and urgent. "We need to talk, now." They didn't ask where I was. They didn't need to. 27 minutes later, I stepped into the same boardroom that had once held my silence like a coffin. Now it was filled with a different kind of tension, the sharp, acrid smell of desperation barely masked by cologne and polished wood. Camilla sat at the far end, pale and still. Her uncle, the CFO, flanking her, jaw tight with the weight of public embarrassment. The rest of the room was quieter than I remembered. Like everyone had run out of questions and was now waiting for answers no one wanted to admit. The board chair didn't waste time. "We need that system back online. Avery, is there a way to reverse the lockdown?" I didn't sit. I didn't smile. I just let the words drop, cool and controlled. "Yes, but not for free." A ripple moved through the room. "I'll reinstate system access." I continued. "Under one condition, Camilla resigns, effective immediately, publicly." Camilla flinched like I'd slapped her. The CFO's lips parted, but I raised a hand, stopping him cold. "And the second condition," I said, eyes sweeping across the room. "The service contract for the audit control system transfers fully to my firm. Exclusive license, maintenance, security, rights of deployment, all of it." Gasps. One board member's pen slipped from his fingers and clattered on the table. The CFO finally found his voice. "You're extorting us." "No," I replied, voice steady as ice. "I'm offering you a lifeline. The audit system isn't just locked, it's flagged. The Oversight Commission is already reviewing your data trail, and they'll see every user ID, every login, every adjustment." Then I let it hang. "I don't need to say who edited the reports. The logs will." Camilla's face crumpled. Her carefully painted mask cracked down the middle. She opened her mouth, perhaps to deny, perhaps to beg, but no sound emerged. The room seemed to shrink around her, across the table. The CFO looked away. The board chair cleared his throat, nodded once. "We accept the terms." I turned toward the screen, already dialing in the credentials that would bring their empire back from the edge, on my terms. This time, the girl they silenced was gone. The architect had returned. The boardroom smelled different now. Gone was the sterile scent of panic that had clung to these walls hours ago. In its place was something sweeter. Control. I sat where I once stood in silence, the polished table gleaming like a mirror between us. A leather folder rested in front of me, embossed in gold. Maintenance and licensing agreement. Exclusive provider, Lock Systems, LLC. The number on the last page, 2000, glowed like a quiet sunrise. "Sign here," the board chair said, sliding the pen across the table. His voice was soft now, almost deferential. I picked it up, steady and deliberate, and let the ink flow with the weight of everything they once tried to strip from me. 11 years of building, of bleeding loyalty into a machine they thought they owned, distilled into this single stroke of black against white. As I set the pen down, the room exhaled. Someone clapped softly, awkwardly. The CFO didn't look at me, Camilla wasn't there to glare anymore, because she was downstairs. The hum of cameras drifted faintly from the street, a storm of flashes and shouted questions ricocheting off glass as two security guards ushered her through the revolving doors. The queen of curated perfection. Head bowed, hands shielding her face from a wall of light she couldn't spin her way out of. Her uncle trailed behind, eyes hollow with the ruin of a legacy. I rose from the chair, smoothing my jacket as the folder closed with a soft, decisive snap. No one stopped me when I walked toward the door this time. No cutting remarks, no false smiles, only silence heavy with the kind of respect that follows inevitability. At the threshold, I paused, letting my gaze linger on the company logo etched in steel across the far wall. For years, it had been a banner I served under, a symbol of purpose. Now, it was just metal and polish, empty of meaning. I leaned closer, my reflection folding into the letters, and whispered the words that had been waiting since the night they stripped me bare. Camilla once told me I had no future here. Today, that future is worth $2 billion. Outside, the city pulsed with lights, 1,000 windows glittering like possibilities I finally owned. My car slid into the curb, driver ready, door open like a promise. Minutes later, I stepped into my new office, 40 floors up in a tower that bore my name on the lease. The glass stretched wall to wall, reflecting the electric sprawl of the skyline. In the dark pane, I saw myself, not the woman they humiliated, but the architect of her own empire. I touched the window, feeling the thrum of the city beneath my fingertips, and smiled. The storm was over, and I had become the weather. There was a time I thought staying silent was the only way to survive, but the moment I was pushed out, I realized something far more powerful. I didn't need a seat at their table. I could build my own. If this story reminded you that dignity is worth defending, that quiet strength is still strength, then I hope you'll take a second to let me know. Drop a comment, share this with someone who needs it, and hit that like button if it resonated with you, and if you believe in stories where justice finds its way back. Don't forget to subscribe. I have more to share, because this isn't just one story, it's the beginning of many.